answering some questions that have come in. I held a Q&A, well, not really a Q&A. I held a Ask Me Anything hour this week for those who are in my courses. They've signed up for the course in the biology of freeze starting January. So we're doing a 6-week deep dive just into the freeze response. And so they have joined. And so we had a Ask Me Anything session. They turned in such great questions that I wanted to bring these to everyone so that you can hear both their questions and my answers. And I have to say that I love those people that come into my courses. I don't know why I attract the best people in the world, but I do. And I absolutely love them and the depth that they are looking at themselves and wanting to go deeper in their healing. So, first question around grief. I don't know how many of you have been challenged by the waves of grief that can hit. I know that that's been my story. In fact, grief was what precipitated my chronic fatigue syndrome and autoimmunity. So I am very familiar with waves of grief that feel way too big for us. So the question is, I struggle with how to support my parts from the waves of grief so I can be fully present in caring for my disabled daughter and managing the care of my husband who has an irreversible illness. Okay, right there. We want to show up for other people. We want to be fully present. And then we have waves of grief. And oftentimes what is happening is that the waves feel so big that we then disconnect in order to function. If we allowed ourselves to feel the depth of our grief, same thing with anger, or I want to say even joy. I know that that sounds unusual to say that we wouldn't be able to experience full joy, but this is the case. And so we put distance between ourselves and this emotion, and putting distance is one of the trauma patterns. It's how we survive overwhelm. And this is what she is describing. How do I support my parts, the parts of herself, right? The part that is feeling the grief. How do I support parts of myself from these waves of grief so I can be fully present in caring for my disabled daughter and managing the care of my husband who has an irreversible illness? Now, I'm reading into this a bit, so this may not be fully her truth, but I would imagine that part of her grief is that she has a disabled daughter, that her daughter has something that is negatively affecting her life, and that her husband has an irreversible illness. So much of our grief and trauma can be because we're watching other people suffer and we're not able to stop it. It's a big point for those of us who are practitioners and professionals because we are witness to so much pain. And how do we stop it? We're going to get to that question. Is it our job to stop it? Or what do we do though? What do we do? So here is what I have done to work with my own grief over the years. And especially as we go into the holidays, this can be very important for some of you who will have grief surface during the holidays. What I do is I no longer ignore it like I used to. I used to feel sadness and feel grief and then reach for something. And whether that was, let me reach for my phone to scroll on social media or to text someone, let me just avoid, distract, and numb. Instead, what I do now is I actually give it a moment. I give it time. Now, this is different than what many people, especially those who maybe want to follow a positive psychology type of mentality, would say to do, right? Because actually what happens is that when we say, no, I only want to think positive thoughts, I only want to focus on the positive, we ignore, and I'm going to use a stronger word here, we abandon that part of us that is in the grief. That part does not go away if we abandon it. In fact, it only gets louder. And so what I would want us to do is experiment with giving it time, giving it attention, rather than avoiding it. And so here's literally what I do. When that wave of grief hits me, I pause whatever I'm doing. I pause and I do something that you might consider is really silly. That's fine. You can laugh at me. I don't care. What I do is I acknowledge it out loud. So I will even say, I'm having a feeling right now. I'm having some feelings right now. And just that acknowledgement allows that part of me to feel heard. It knows that I've heard the message. And then what I do is I move into some sort of support for my body so that my body can be present to it and not need to avoid, numb, or distract. So what that means for me is I'm usually putting my hand over my heart because that's usually where it shows up for me. It may be different for you. If it's showing up in your gut, I would want you to make contact with your gut, not because that's going to take it away, but because that's going to help you stay present to it and not need to push it away to create distance. And what I have found is that when I give it the presence, when I actually give it a minute, I stop whatever else I'm doing. It's just like a little child who came to me and said, I have an owie. Okay. Rather than just brush you off, which was probably the experience of many of us growing up, rather than doing what was done to us, I am going to pause and I'm going to say, let me look at your owie. Tell me about your owie. Let me kiss your owie. And if you need to stay with me right now and stay close with me because you have an owie, I'm fine with that. And what I do is if I have my hand over my heart, for example, I just give it that moment to say, what do you want me to know here? What is it that's so important to you that you want me to hear this right now? And what I'm able to get to is that person or that thing is actually really important to me or was really important to me. And there are my tears. And so for me, it's this ability to hear the real message, which is not a message of sadness and hopelessness. It's actually a message of what do I really value in life? And it always comes down to I value connection. I value authenticity. And I had that with this person, or I didn't have that with this person, and I would have wanted to have that with this person at this time of year. They passed away and I never got that with them. Or for this person who asked this question, I have a disabled daughter. I'm never going to have the life with her that I wanted her to have. My husband has an irreversible illness. That means that, right? And then there's the meaning of it that we create. But it's pointing to what do I really care about? And that's behind our grief. And if I avoid, distract, or numb, I miss the whole entire message, where it's actually helping me get clearer on how do I want to live the rest of my life, given that this is really important to me, this person or this essence in a relationship. So that is what I do in order to manage the waves of grief. I explained a lot more than just managing the waves of grief, but that is, at the end of the day, that is how I would answer the question for how I handle the waves of grief is I pause, I acknowledge I'm having a feeling right now, and then I move to support. And support means like a physical connection with my body so that I can be present to it. And then I ask, why is this so important to you? And I gain clarity. And then that part of me that's experiencing the grief is able to feel connected with me. And I then get that sense that I'm carrying that part of me for the rest of the day. I've like tucked them into my pocket so that they're not having to experience and feel this emotion alone. I've got them. And that's what I get to do now for my parts, that I get to be the true self and I get to take care of them and make sure that they are not abandoned and feel all alone. Next question is around generational trauma. Ooh, such a great question. Generational trauma. I am curious as I'm noticing, this is the question. I'm curious as I'm noticing generational trauma as I do the work with myself. Do you have suggestions on ways to use the biology of trauma framework and your research to shift and release generational trauma? This is such a huge topic. How do I answer this one in 90 seconds? I can't. So, what I will say is, I will give you the big picture of that. Generational trauma is passed down in all of the ways that trauma is stored in our body. So it's going to be no different than any other stored trauma that we have in our body, which is great because we know those levels, we know what to do. So we're going to need to do, I'll start with the top. We're going to need to do mind level. So the mind level is these parts of us. We've just talked about the part of us that can feel grief, but we have a part of us that is, in essence, sometimes a part of our ancestors. I think of my grandparents and going through a death march in Armenia. And I know the story of my grandfather, who was a young boy at the time, and what he had to do in order to survive, because he did go through the whole entire death march. And then they were at the final encampment surrounded by these hills, and their only escape was through the soldiers who were celebrating the massacre of them the next morning. And he had to crawl out on the sand on his belly. And is there a part of me that is from him? A part of me that, no matter what the danger and how insurmountable it feels and it looks, I am going to be able to fight for my life. I think so. I think that that is a part of me from my grandfather. And so we look at our beliefs about ourselves, the beliefs that our ancestors would have held about themselves, so that we can then look at the beliefs that we hold that were actually passed down from them. This is also then somatic level. So many of you may have heard stories that a person has a sensation sometimes that they are drowning, or I'm noticing in the comments right now on Instagram, dizziness in a car. And sometimes we find out something about their ancestors that we realize that that sensation that they're having is not from them. It's not from an experience that they've had in their lifetime. It's actually an experience that their ancestors had. This has been very common in stories of the generations down of Holocaust survivors. So for those who were in the concentration camps, and maybe they were, all the things. We're not gonna we're not gonna name them here. But we then can still have these somatic sensations showing up in our body, and we think, my goodness, when in my lifetime have I been around burning flesh? When in my lifetime have I been suffocated and I couldn't breathe? And it ends up not being our stuff at all, except it is our stuff because it was our ancestors. Now, the great thing is that just like somatic implicit memories that come from our lifetime, we can rewire that stuff. Anything in the nervous system can be rewired. It's called neuroplasticity. So there's so much hope of what we can do. And it's just helpful to identify when we can, if we can, that this is from that ancestor. It's not actually for me, so we can do some work around it. But even if we don't know, it's okay. We can still work with it. That is the coolest thing about the body. We don't need to know the stories to work with it, even when it's generational trauma. Now, there's one more level with the generational trauma, and this has been an area that I talk about in my book with the biology of trauma. The biology of trauma is the trauma that gets passed down in generations because the trauma response changes our DNA. How is that so? It doesn't change the actual letters or text of our DNA. It doesn't change our actual genes. What it does is it changes the markers on our genes that tell our repair and DNA enzymes, open this gene and read it, make it into a protein, or no, leave this one alone, don't make any proteins from this. So it changes the expression of our DNA, which is what determines our longevity, our diseases, and so much of our lifespan. And so this is a big explanation for why not only adverse childhood experiences is going to shorten a person's life unless they do the healing work, and why generational trauma can be passed down through our biology. So again, whether it's generational trauma or our own trauma, it does not matter. It is still the same 3 levels that all stored trauma in the body needs repair and resolution: mind, body, or somatic implicit memories, and the biology. Let's go to question number 3, trauma and autoimmune clients. This question came from one of the practitioners in my training program: trauma and autoimmune clients who can't take action. Now, what does that mean, can't take action? We're talking about the freeze response. So the freeze response is that first full step of the body's trauma response. And it is the important step where our nervous system makes us stop moving or immobilizes us. That's why it's called the freeze response. And so whenever we're talking about can't take action, we're seeing a chronic freeze. This is not just an acute freeze. This is where it's now become chronic. And so we call it a chronic freeze. We even often use the word chronic functional freeze, meaning we are still functioning, but we do have this chronic freeze. And for me, what that looked like was I was in such a chronic functional freeze that it took so much energy for me to power through. But boy, did I power through. I mean, I was high functioning. And I had 2 master's degrees. I was in residency. I accomplished all of that before my great crash in 2014. And so a person can be high functioning and still have a chronic functional freeze. So their level of functioning does not say that they don't have stored trauma. It just will reflect the degree to which they have to push through and overpower. If that makes sense, would love for you to comment that you can see this relationship between chronic functional freeze and having to push through because you just don't have the energy naturally. You have to create that. So the question is now, I'm a psychologist trained in trauma and somatic work and have clients suffering both from trauma and autoimmunity, and taking any action becomes overbearing. What ideas and suggestions do you have to work with this group of people, especially when the story or the narrative has such a tight hold on them? This is so good. So this is almost all of chapter 11 of my book on the biology of trauma. Chapter 11 goes into our early life and why our early life forms the foundation of our neuroception. Our neuroception being its perception of our capacity. And what happens is that when we start having experiences of overwhelm early in our life, it programs our nervous system to believe that everything is too much for us. Professor Seligman, a psychologist in the 1960s, studied this in dogs and coined the term learned helplessness. It's not a very flattering term. I recognize that. And yet I will also say that this was my nervous system, completely my nervous system, despite being high functioning. So learned helplessness is actually a feature of chronic functional freeze. And once we know that, we can work with it. And so autoimmunity is a condition where often the biology of trauma started so early that it started before we could talk. So autoimmunity, the roots of autoimmunity are often starting at 1 month old, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months old. Isn't that interesting? Which means that when we have autoimmune clients who can't take action, I'm going to laughingly say, which autoimmune clients can take action? Which autoimmune clients don't have a chronic functional freeze? They all do. That's part of autoimmunity. Autoimmunity is one of the classic manifestations of a biology of trauma, which is why when I discovered my autoimmunity in 2014, that was what prompted me to even know that I had trauma work to do. Otherwise, I had still never seen trauma in my childhood. So that was when I was like, oh, then I must not actually know what trauma is. If I don't think that I've had trauma in my mind, I don't think that I've had trauma, but my body is clearly saying we are holding on to pain, fear, and overwhelm, so much so that it has become our biology and in the form of autoimmunity. So what you're going to want to do is, this is what the whole biology of freeze and overwhelm is about. This is what I walk through because you're going to want to start a person from the very beginning. And the very beginning, as I explain in chapter 12 of my book with the framework, the very beginning is not all of this deep trauma work. You want to start with helping them learn how to create an immediate felt sense of safety in their body. We learn to shift our state, then we learn to stay in a state of safety and security or support, and then we can work on building our capacity and actually doing the deeper work. So if your autoimmune clients can still not take action, your place to start is with helping them learn how to create a felt sense of safety in their body in the moment by themselves. I don't want them relying on you to be able to be the only person that can create safety for them. And then we progress through all of the phases of the healing journey, which again, I've got laid out in my book. It's too much for me to explain here, but we have the phases of the healing journey. And this is where so many people are going wrong. Many practitioners are still going wrong. They're doing phase 3 stuff at a time when they should be doing phase 1. So we've got to get really clear on what are the different phases of the healing journey so that we can stick with phase 1 when we need to do phase 1. Otherwise, we're going to be putting them into overwhelm, and there is no growth in overwhelm. No growth in overwhelm ever. So let's figure out how to get out of overwhelm and then stay out of overwhelm, and then we can do the deeper healing work. Question 5, another one on freeze and shut down after dental work. Oh, this is so good because there is so much that happens in the jaw. Oh my goodness. The jaw is a place like our gut that holds so much. If you don't believe me, come take the 21-day journey with me. Learn that VU with jaw, where we bring in the jaw movement, and feel the heat rush to your face. Feel the grief come up. Feel all these the anger. Ooh, the jaw holds back anger because when we really want to say something, what do? We clench our jaw to hold ourselves back from saying something, which is usually speaking up for ourselves, defending ourselves. Interesting. And so all of this is held in the jaw. Ah, so good. But that's not what the question is. The question is the freeze and shut down after dental and body work. This was me. This was me. The question is, any thoughts on the reason why my body goes into freeze and shut down and detox symptoms for 1 to 3 weeks following orthodontist and dentist appointments, as well as the following activities I no longer can do because of shutdown: lymphatic massage, fascia body work, the power plate, sauna, certain supplements, and the hyperbaric oxygen treatment. Her guess is the cellular danger response, which you will want to read chapter 4 of my book on the cell danger response. But I'm very curious what you think is happening. Oh, this is so good. So good. All right. In order to answer this question succinctly, I am going to remind ourselves that our body has a line. That line is our capacity. Anything up until that line, and we're good. Even though it's stressful, we're okay. It's not creating ongoing damage. We're not going into overwhelm. It's okay. And then once we cross that line, it is not okay. So, what is that line? That line is our current capacity. It includes our current perception of our capacity. Now, what makes up that capacity? What makes up that capacity is that dashboard that I talk about in chapter 8 of my book, the dashboard of all this information that our nervous system is collecting. That includes our emotional support, our sense of being supported, our sense of resilience, but also our biology. Our biology makes up a large component of our capacity. And so when we have an orthodontist and dentist appointment and we're going into freeze and shutdown, my question would be, what chemicals are they using? Are they creating an exposure to mercury? Mercury will put us into freeze and shutdown. Are they exposing ourselves, or are they exposing us to any of these biological elements that create overwhelm simply because of what they're doing to our biology and our mitochondria? This is the same type of person who, when they go to exercise, they can only do a little bit of exercise because if they do too much, they are on the couch for the next 3 days. Their body was overwhelmed by the amount of lactic acid that was produced. It can't clear it out. And so when I see something like lymphatic massage, orthodontist and dentist appointment, body work, all of these things are activities that are going to increase the release and exposure to toxins. And if your body has problems with a detoxification pathway, it is going to cause overwhelm. Now, the crazy thing is that we will experience that emotionally. And so we assume that there's this emotional overwhelm in our life, not realizing that, no, it was just mercury. No, it was just that lymphatic massage released so many toxins into my bloodstream, and my body does not have the current capacity to clear those out. And so they're just circulating. It's better to have toxins stored in our fat cells than to have them running around in our blood. And that is why we don't want to just jump into any of these activities that can release these toxins. So that would be my answer, is just based on what she is describing. It sounds like a release of toxins, not something actually emotional. And yes, that is the cell danger response. And your body needs some detoxification support. So what might that look like? One of the first things that comes to mind are the biochemical imbalances. So we have 3 common biochemical imbalances. One of them, the undermethylation or overmethylation, but your methylation status being one that significantly impairs your detoxification process. And that is why I take SAMe, because I have an undermethylation status. So I take SAMe, I take additional support for detoxification because I need my body to have a better process and strategies for detoxifying than what it naturally does because of its methylation status. Music recommendations for vagal regulation. Oh, this is an interesting question. Music recommendations for vagal regulation. The question is, I appreciate how much Dr. Amy uses music in her courses. Yes, I do. There are so many different versions of vagal nervous system regulation and healing music out there. Any that she would recommend to listen to? Yes. And music is something that I have found that we use to either match or shift our internal state. So that if I am stressed, if I want to feel stressed and get things done, I'm going to turn on music that is fast-paced, that is matching my inner state. But if I am stressed and I want to calm down, well, then I'm going to need to choose very different music. I need to choose music that have like a 60 to 80 beats per minute, around, 72 to 78 is that sweet spot often for slower tempos that will help my heartbeat match with the rhythm of the music. And that is sometimes a part of why the music is having an effect on us, is because it's actually changing our heart rate. It's changing our heart rate so that our heart rate matches the rhythm of the music. So at the end of the day, as we do with everything, I would want you to test it out. Play different music, and as long as you're attuned to your body, you can notice what effect it has on your nervous system, and that's how you know what is right for you. Question 7 is around working with shame and guilt. And then we have Sammy with high histamine. And we have fawning as a 4th nervous system state. Those are the 3 questions I have left. I will come back and do those at a later time. I am going to be doing more lives and answering questions. So I will look at even questions that came in here while I was live so that I can add those to my list. And next time that I go live, I will answer those questions. So with that, thank you. I'm your host, Dr. Amy, and I will publish this as a Biology of Trauma podcast episode so that you can enjoy this there as well. All right. Thank you. Thank you.